Hey, good morning, all. It's June 22nd, which, if you check your calendar, tells you two things. One is the first full day of summer. Happy summer, everyone. Days are just getting shorter from here on out. So if you really love the sunshine, hurry up because pretty soon it's going to be late November. But it's also a Tuesday on June 22nd, which means around here on the Common Good podcast, it's Politics Day. Joined by Robb Ryerse and back lurking in the shadows, producer Dan Dietrich. And Doug Pagitt here. I am in. There's Dan. Dan makes a brief appearance. Just shows up in the window as a shadowy figure. And we're really glad to see all of you aboard. I'm in Minneapolis today, sitting down, and I'll tell you, I have a touch of the flu. Woke up this morning feeling fluish. I haven't had a flu test or anything, so I don't know. So if you are still, flu and COVID concerned, and you're like, I just don't want to be around someone, you need to take your earbuds out right now, or shut that computer screen, or swipe up. I understand that, So, Rob, if I just disappear at some point or fall over backward, just keep going without me. The people matter.
Yeah, we could do that. Let me ask you, Doug, do you think that you are flu positive now because you have stopped wearing a mask?
Well,
because I like the
I've got to blame it on something.
The amazing side benefit of wearing masks for over a year has been like, I haven't had a cold, like just haven't gotten sick, haven't gotten COVID, haven't gotten anything else.
Yeah. You're just weakening your immune system day by day, just waiting for the big one to come get you. Yeah, I don't know. I would assume so. I'd assume I can blame it on everything. But as producer Dan and I were chatting a little bit ago, it's not viruses that make people sick. It's people that make people sick. So I just want to blame it on the people, somebody around. And I just wish, as the former blogger wanted to do, we just should have sent those people to Guantanamo. The people that have if you don't know what I'm referring to, the former president of these United States was suggesting that people on cruise ships that were American citizens should be put in Guantanamo until they were done quarantining, because he didn't think that would be a problem to, put American citizens on borrowed, rented U.S. Facility in Cuba, where we also wrongly keep terrorists and abuse them. So, that's kind of how I feel this morning, thinking through the list of who did I get this from. But if I got it from little Wesley Puck, my little grandson, then it's just fine. I'm glad to have.
Absolutely. Can you imagine being the person who, you plan your cruise, you've been planning it for a while. You're so excited that you finally get to go on vacation. This is the first vacation you've taken in decades. You and your wife head out on the boat and you spend a wonderful couple of days until you both get COVID. And then you get taken to Guantanamo. Like you get dropped off at Gitmo.
And the whole time you're just singing Alanis Morissette. Isn't it ironic? Yeah, totally. I do. There were whatever number of people that, in the middle of March 23rd, they had just retired, hadn't vacationed ever. And this was the big time.
It was
and they were on that boat. And I'm sure they got a refund and can get on another boat, which I'm sure they're just thrilled to do. Because how do you repay someone when they've missed out on that? Well, hey, Rob, it's Tuesday, which means a lot of things, including on random Tuesdays, there are elections. On the important first Tuesday of November every other year, there's a congressional election, and in lots of years, there's a Senate election every 4 years. Presidential election. But sometimes on a random June 22nd, there's an election that matters. And there's one of those today, especially for those of you, in the Big Apple. I have not heard anyone refer to it as the Big Apple in a long time. Maybe it's lost that little moniker. But New Yorkers are choosing today which Democratic candidate is going to be their nominee to be mayor of New York. So it's not very often that a mayoral race seems important, and it's not very often that primaries feel all that important. But every once in a while, both those things are true. And every once in a while, it's the Democratic mayoral candidate election. in a city like New York, because well, I don't know that this is true, that whoever wins the Democratic nomination is going to be the governor or be the mayor, because they've had a lot of
Yeah.
Republican governors, but it feels that
Yeah.
way. This year. What's your take? Do you
Yeah.
picking a winner there?
Yeah, I think it certainly does feel like this is the race of who's going to, who's going to be the next mayor of New York City. Now, obviously, New York City being the biggest city in the country, coming back from COVID, coming back from the protests that shut the city down. I mean, I was there. My son, as your son does, my son lives in New York, and I was there in about a year ago in July of 2020, and I never seen anything like it. Between COVID and the protests that were taking place at the time, everything was boarded up. There was no traffic in Manhattan. There were barely any. I went to Times Square, and there was maybe 20 people in Times Square. There were kids on skateboards going down Broadway, right down the middle of Broadway, because there was no traffic. I've never seen anything like it. So New York has been through a lot.
Yeah.
And this is a really important election. Mayor de Blasio has been someone who has become increasingly polarizing, and seems to be, after his failed presidential bid, seems to be someone who doesn't have much support. And so they're really,
I forgot that he also ran for president for like
yeah, like everybody did. There's, I think there's a real sense in the city that, there's a desire for there to be, kind of a new mantle. And what's interesting is there's essentially kind of three candidates to watch. The big name one is Andrew Yang, who also ran for president and at times has been leading in the polls, though he's dropped a bit. He's an entrepreneur. He wants to get involved in politics and is looking for the right place to do that. And, starting at president didn't work out. So he's, stepped back a bit to be, to run for mayor of New York City. He kind of represents, in my mind, kind of the innovative, entrepreneurial, new thinking kind of Democrats. And we'll see, how big they are in the party. There's also Eric Adams, who is the Brooklyn borough president. He kind of represents to me kind of the party establishment. He's played by the rules, kind of come up from the inside. And like many party establishment folks, there's some big question marks, like, does he actually live in New York City? I don't know if you've seen any of this.
Rumors that he lives in New Jersey, like pictures of his apartment in Brooklyn or with his son.
He took press on a tour through his apartment in Brooklyn, and it really kind of seemed like maybe that's where his son lives, not him. And then there's also Maya Wiley, who's kind of the third one to watch, who represents really the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. And endorsed by AOC, endorsed by Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, and kind of has that upstart progressive energy that so many people have been electrified by in New York City from in 2018 when AOC was elected to Congress, and then in 2020 Jamal Bowman and Mondaire Jones and others. So it seems like this race feels like a microcosm of what's happening within the Democratic Party. You've got kind of these three groups. There's the establishment side, the progressive wing, and then there's kind of these innovative thinkers, who are trying to do something different from within the party. And it'll be interesting to see how strong they are, each of the groups are, and who comes out on top. I expect Eric Adams to win, but I'm kind of rooting for Maya Wiley. And
then there's this Catherine Garcia who's in there too, and I think she was like the sanitation administrator and a number of other things. A real like Eric Adams, you mentioned, real insider. And Catherine Garcia and Andrew Yang paired up over the weekend and did campaign rallies together, because in New York City, they're trying this version
Ranked
that you
choice
normally, you normally use when you're trying to pick the best pie at a summer festival, where you don't just vote for one person, you get to vote for three, and then they pick the person that got the top votes. I mean, you can probably tell I'm snarky about ranked choice voting.
Oh, are you?
I just think it's never produced anything better than the other way around, and it's just
Well,
complicated and
no,
a
actually,
mess. And I'm willing to be
actually,
converted on it, but not in this lifetime, is what I've decided. I think when I come back,
well,
in another life.
well, we might have to get my friend Betsy Sweet on the
Sure.
podcast to convince you of ranked choice voting, because Maine was the first state in the country that got it passed, and Jared Golden won his election in 2018 and became congressman from the great state of Maine as a result of ranked choice voting, and so it is
right, and it's not possible to tell what would have happened had it not been ranked choice voting. Would people have done something? I get it, like you can't really know, but the idea is that it's supposed to increase participation. It's supposed to allow other parties to be seen as viable. I get it on the notion that people want public funding to be more available to parties other than the Democrats and Republicans. And one of the big pushes for this is that if you can get a show of support for Green parties, or for what's the one that runs the Insurrection, the Libertarians, or any of these groups that you'd want them to seem more viable. It's a way that you can get there by those candidates receiving more votes without someone feeling like, I really want this Democrat or Republican, but I also want to support this upstart party. Like, I get it that's the problem. I just think there's a better way to solve for that than to put that on the voters, and to ask voters to figure out. Rob, you and I spend a lot of time helping voters think about how to be engaged in politics. To ask them to know more about 6 candidates and what order you would put them in is what I just believe you're turning all of the power of ranked choice voting over to the super insiders. I know that people say it works the other way, but if in most elections, if you would think, I now have to decide not only the person I want, but then the person in second and third place, and what order I would put those in. These are people that must be as deep inside as we are, where we would sit here for an hour a week and talk about politics. So my push is, I think it makes politics less accessible to people. It's all about party machinations. It's serving the political party apparatus in order to expand the political parties. I get that. So emails reminding me of how bad 2 parties are when there's already a bunch. As you know, I like to rant. So that's my thing. I just think it doesn't make sense for a voter. It's sort of that feeling I have when I turn my ballot over and I look at all the judges on the back, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't do my work to decide on the judges. Now, for my mayor and for other, and I know it's not every seat that's being put on a ballot. They don't all have ranked choice voting, but I think even that's confusing. So I guess that's my point. Most people don't know or care. The people who do are people that are deep into the politics of it all, and it's going to give more power to those people. And you could have a second choice person winning only because other people are like, I don't know enough to spend my time. Like, if you're somebody that goes home with a booklet and you read through all the candidates and their positions, just recognize you should get a gold star for that. But you probably shouldn't have a voting system created in your honor.
Well, that's a very counterintuitive argument and interesting. Unconvincing for me
is another word for that nonsense. Unconvincing. Yeah. Okay. Should I keep going? I could go for another 4 minutes on this.
I know. The thing with ranked choice voting is, if the onus on the candidates to actually run quality campaigns and convince voters and earn their votes, if someone does that with a majority of voters, they win.
It's over. Yeah.
So candidates, do your job, earn the votes of voters, and then it doesn't matter who people choose as second place, because 51% of people picked 50% plus one picked you. And make
that was
happen.
going to, if I was going to go on for the next 4 minutes, it was going to be, and by the way, most elections are won by more than 50% anyway. So
Yep.
it doesn't even come into play. When it
Yep.
does is when there's, again, some set of circumstances that normally have to do with some sort of party that's organizing to try to get some leverage. Or where it's, as you've referred to it in some of the other races we've paid attention to, jungle primaries, where the party, the top vote getters in a primary or something are the ones that move forward regardless of their political party. So you could have people from the same political party on the ballot against each other. So yeah, that's a thing. Not to be an old man traditionalist here, but we have enough issues in our voting right now. Should we really throw this one in? Do you want blueberry? Do you want raspberry? Do you want mixed berry? Or do you want pumpkin? Put them in order, because if we run out, we'll bring you your next choice. Oh my gosh, it drives me out of my mind. All right. So on a related theme, the other voting thing happening on this particular day is that the Senate is going to have one of those cloture votes, or a decision to vote. A vote on a decision to talk about a bill that has to do with voting rights. This is where the filibuster comes in.
Yeah.
So this is happening now.
And the cloture vote is to end the debate.
Yes. This is the other version of that, which is to open the debate. Can they even get the debate to the floor? So they're going to have this big thing. It's going to not pass today. Everyone expects that, but it's going to get all the senators on record, and then there's going to be another bill that's going to be presented that Manchin has his fingers on. I don't know if you've been following that one, but not only Manchin's got this one that has 5 major provisions in it, 2 that are the dream list for Republicans, which include voter ID and include purging rolls, of means by which rolls are purged, and then things that really matter to people who care about the democracy, and that includes an end to gerrymandering, opening up early voting, and mail-in voting as a requirement at the federal level. So every state would have to have these, and maybe a couple of other details in there. So it's a real compromise bill, right? Where each side would get things that they're going to say every election is going to have this. And that's kind of a big deal when that comes forward in the next few days. That's not this bill, but it's the one that I think is going to replace this one, that they're going to end up having a chance to pass. Have you thought about that at all? That those provisions, especially the ones for the Republicans really like, the voter ID and purging the voter rolls?
Yeah, I don't remember when we voted Joe Manchin as president or dictator or whatever. When did we decide that Joe Manchin gets to decide?
Oh, when Raphael Warnock won that election. That's when that election. Yeah, you didn't know. It was a ranked choice voting thing that you did. So when Raphael Warnock won in Georgia, and that moved the power of the Senate, then that meant that Joe Manchin. See, if you had known that, then maybe people would have voted differently.
I mean, I say that
Kristen
facetiously
Sinema spelled with an S.
And Kristen Sinema for sure. But Joe Manchin has really kind of relished this idea that he is going to hold up every piece of legislation under the guise of wanting it to be bipartisan, and yet has really struggled to get bipartisan support for the things that he's been proposing. There's not a lot of Republicans who are on board with his so-called compromise bill, and there's been other things that have had broad bipartisan support that haven't been able to go through, such as the January 6th commission, because of Joe Manchin's continued support, though I would say recent support, because he used to be against it, the filibuster. And so there's a lot of this gridlock in DC that I remember back when I was a conservative in my political philosophy. I used to joke about how I loved gridlock, because gridlock meant that Congress wasn't getting anything done, and
they
that was
weren't
good for
meddling in people's lives.
that's right. That was good for the American people. The government do as little as possible. I have a much different perspective now, and what we've got is like this new version of gridlock, um, based on Joe Manchin's value of perceived bipartisanship. And I think what it's going to do, I'm nervous that it's going to end up submarining what is a really important bill that needs to be passed that can protect voter. We have an assault on voting rights all across the country. We've got very active attempts to make it more difficult for people to vote rather than easier for people to vote all over the country. And this is an attempt to protect people's ability to vote. And it seems like it's going to get stalled through this
and what
buffoonery that happens in the Senate.
Right. And what Manchin's ultimately saying is, and I've heard him say this, I think it's bad for the country if bills are passed because of partisan impulses. But he thinks that would be worse than bills not being passed because of partisan impulses. And I'm like, what? I get it that you don't want partisanship to be driving the agenda for the American people and what bills are passed. That's your point. But that's what's happening when bills are not being passed because of the filibuster.
Yep.
And I think this is what people need to sort of push on this, on that part of it. Dennis is saying in the comments that he believes that Manchin's bill also makes Election Day a national holiday, which is interesting. I didn't know that. I'd like to see that because now that we're on a run, let's roll up the national holidays. Let's get a few more.
That's right.
It's often felt like we've had some lag periods. Let's get another one. I think a national holiday would be great, especially if the national holiday was partnered with early voting being available in every state, right? And that's a reasonable level of early voting with mail-in voting, which I think it also does. I mean, it's just going to be a good thing to get more people voting. I don't think that means, like a lot of people though, that means that one party's going to win more than the other party. I don't think it means that at all. I think there are reasons that the Republicans want to keep voting limited because it punishes certain groups of people who they don't want to vote. But in some places in the country, the racial and the cultural backgrounds are not as intense as they are in some other places. And so it could really change the dynamics both directions, depending on the makeup of the district or the makeup of the state. So voting cuts across evenly. Republicans used to do well on mail-in voting, and Democrats right now are doing well on it. And so anyway, it's a big part of the whole thing. But in the end, as you say, people got to show up no matter what.
That's right. And let me just mention why there's a sense of why Election Day being a national holiday would be a good thing. If we make Election Day a national holiday, more businesses are going to be closed than currently are on that day, and that frees up people to be able to go vote. There's kind of this calculation that every year, every election year, something like around half of the American public eligible voters actually vote. And there's a lot of reasons for that, some of which is apathy, some of which is disinformation, some of which is people simply cannot vote because they have to work. Now, mail-in voting, early voting has been trying to solve for that problem, and one of the other solutions has been proposed is having Election Day be a national holiday. Now, I think the problem is that that minimum wage worker who works at Walmart, Walmart's going to be open on Election Day even if it's a national holiday. The bank might be might be closed, but McDonald's is going to be open. So my fear is that even though I support Election Day being a national holiday, my fear is that it won't have the impact in terms
Yep.
of increasing voter turnout as hoped, simply because there's so many low wage workers whose businesses won't be closed on election day,
Yeah.
even if it's
Yep.
a national holiday.
And if schools are closed, which I don't know that is suggesting that would add an additional burden to people, right?
Yeah.
Who want to vote at the same place where they drop their kids off of school or have kid care that's carried by the school. Well, it's good to know that voting's back in the business, especially those of us, around the vote common good world. Hey, there was another vote that kind of mattered, and this is the one that went on out in the in the West, where a bunch of people got together at the Western Conservative Summit's big meeting, which is a conservative group of people to do lots of things, to rally about their fears for America and their desire to attack our capital, this kind of thing, whatever it is they talk about at these meetings. In the off year between their insurrection that many of them supported and the next election, what is there to talk about? Well, one of the things is they did a little straw poll, and they did a straw poll of, hey, which famous person in the political world right now do you think should be the presidential nominee for the Republicans? And you know who didn't win? The former
blogger
and former president of the United States, disgraced, twice impeached president. He didn't win, but Ron DeSantis, who's the governor of Florida, did. And that means that Donald Trump will have to come to Ron DeSantis from now on and ask, what does Ron think? This is Ron DeSantis' party, because the 238 people or whatever it was at the Western Conservative Summit picked him. But all joking aside, not at all. Ron DeSantis is really
a rising star.
A rising star. I mean, I find myself doing all the things that I did in 2015 about Donald Trump. Like, there's no way. Literally, it's like I pulled out the list in my brain of things I said about Donald Trump, and I moved it over into my brain spot, and I swapped out the words Donald Trump for Ron DeSantis and thought the same things. I think he could be formidable, and that's terrifying to me. I don't know which is worse, right? Like the level of just benign incompetence that is Donald Trump, or the calculating Ron DeSantis, who, was killing people in Fallujah and went to all the places, like went to Yale and Harvard Law School, and he's got all that stuff. And apparently people who like what he does say he's an efficient, competent governor. I just find him to be because I disagree with nearly every utterance that comes out of his mouth, I just tend to set him aside. And I don't think that's a smart thing to do, just because so I think he needs someone that does need to be taken more seriously, and is probably the leading thinker person as an actual politician in the Republican Party right now, at least as proven by the Western Conservative Summit meeting.
A couple of things about this. One, this has got to be concerning for Trump and for his people, because there has been, up until this point, the perception that it is Donald Trump's party. He is the de facto nominee for 2024. As I was driving to the office this morning, I passed a house that proudly flies a Trump 2024 flag. And, there's no Ron DeSantis 2024 flags that are flying out there. There is this perception that, this is Trump's if he wants it. And now all of a sudden there's this small sampling of voters saying, well, maybe not.
Yeah. Maybe not.
And that's got to be,
I mean, he came in second, which is great. I mean, Donnie should feel good about coming in second. There's a lot of former presidents who are the second choice, so he's got to feel good about that. There's no downside to you losing to Ron DeSantis. I mean, it's not like when you lost to Joe Biden or anything. You shouldn't take it on the chin. It's he should feel good about it.
Yeah. And no, he shouldn't. This should be really disconcerting. And you just imagine what this is doing to him internally, because this is someone who's proven himself to be so petty and to care about these tiny little things, and when they go his way, to brag about them incessantly. And this has got to just be driving him nuts. Now, maybe he can take some comfort in the fact that the Western Conservative Summit presidential straw poll has not historically been a bellwether of who's going to win. 2016 Ted Cruz won this straw poll, and this is not this is just a little snapshot.
Trump doesn't surprise me as someone who cares about that nuance. He wants to win. He wants to win every popularity contest. I bet the only person that saw this as worse news than Donald Trump, that Ron DeSantis won the straw poll for the Western Conservative Summit, was Ron DeSantis. I bet he's thinking like, oh my gosh, no, because now, if Donald Trump hadn't been removed from social media for actions that led to an insurrection, just let that sit in for a minute. Behavior so bad that YouTube, Twitter, Facebook said you can't use our platform, and yet there are people who want him to still continue to use the presidency. Unbelievable. Mm-hmm. But his behavior is so bad. But if it hadn't been, he could have written a very sharply worded tweet, possibly misspelled, but a sharply worded.
Ron DeSantis would have a nickname by now.
Oh yeah,
that
straw poll Ronnie. Ron,
you're
straw poll Ron.
You're absolutely right that what this does is it puts a target on Ron DeSantis, for Donald Trump to aim at. And, these two who have been very close allies, we have seen Trump over and over and over again turn on very close allies when they are a challenge to him. And it will be interesting to see if that happens in the, tweets turned press releases from the Save America PAC. If any of those, become targeted and directed at Ron DeSantis, we'll see that, this actually has gotten under Donald Trump's skin, and for his own political future or those of his children and their aspirations, they've got to take Ron DeSantis down.
It has slid under his slightly orange colored skin. There is little doubt in my mind about that. Hey, on the other, political front, a big news story, one that connects with faith, and that is that the Catholic bishops have gotten together to have a vote. A lot of voting going on. If it's appropriate for politicians who support the law of the land and abortion rights for women to choose an abortion before 20 weeks of pregnancy, or to choose one for medical purposes after that period of time. If a politician who supports those laws should be allowed to receive communion in the Catholic Church. This is a big story. Julie in the chat has raised it. Dennis has raised it. It's a real thing. And the Catholic bishops are, like a lot of leaders in religious traditions, out of step with Catholic peoples. Catholic individuals don't tend to believe this, but if you become a bishop in the Catholic Church, you're a more insider than you are your typical lay person that attends a church and identifies themselves as Catholic. So for Catholic bishops, they're very serious about this. They've raised it before. Now they're having these votes on what they should do about this. They're not binding. When the bishops vote on something like this, they're kind of giving their moral authority to it. So it's still a big deal. Only the Pope, apparently, in the Catholic structure, can tell a bishop what to do, who then can tell the priests what to do. So only Pope Francis could say, hey, bishop, I've forgotten the name of the bishop in Washington, D.C., where Biden would likely be receiving communion, or maybe back in Delaware. Only the Pope could tell that bishop to tell the priest, don't give him communion. This drives me out of my mind, both politically and theologically. It's just, it's maddening that these same, I'm not trying to do whataboutism. I'm trying to do seriously-ism. There are so many other issues in which politicians are out of step with Catholic official teaching. The death penalty.
Poverty.
Treatment of your neighbors, just gluttony. There are so many things by which the Catholic Church wants to have a moral authority. Yep. and they choose this one. And then the idea that what you do, well, and as a Protestant, and then as like a free church Protestant, and then as somebody in sort of the very flat structured of the free church Protestant tradition, I'm not one who sees communion as a gatekeeping function. I know for a
Right.
lot of Catholics, only a Catholic in good standing should receive communion in a Catholic church. So if you're not Catholic and you go to church with your Catholic friends, you don't receive communion there, not because they say you're not Christian, but because you're not part of their communion. You're not part of their fold. You're not part of their chosen, this group of people. You could be baptized into their church, go through the process, become a Catholic, and then you can. So it's a system by which it's only for insiders. And I know a lot of our friends, especially Protestant friends, are on the internet saying things like to say that someone can't receive communion is to say that they're outside the love of God. I'm not trying to be a defender of Catholics, but that's not really how they see the function of communion. Communion is a part of something that only people who are in good standing inside the Catholic Church can have. Where the tradition that I come from, communion sort of anyone, anywhere, nobody really thinks about it. It's not used as a mark of membership. It's certainly not used, and even many Catholics wouldn't say that you're not a person who's a Christian or a child of God or any word you want to use that would put you in the universal faith fold. They're just saying, hey, you're out of step with the Catholic Church. But then it takes you to this other list of things that politicians would be out of step with. And it's a bad choice. It leans into Christian nationalism, and I think it needs to be called out on those fronts. So how are you thinking about this?
Exactly the same way you do. There is the Catholic Church is so fascinating. There is as there is in evangelical or mainline churches, there are so many different expressions. There's so many different perspectives, and there is a fight about who is going to be most prominent, which one is going to win the day, and the really kind of militant Catholic, approach is out there. It is a viable thing within the church to,
and is supported by the bishops in a lot of cases.
Yeah. And what seems so often that Pope Francis seems to be this moderating force, this more progressive force, someone who seems out of step even with the bishops at time and trying to bring a different attitude there. It seems like there's much resistance to that. And I feel really bad on a personal level for Joe Biden, because Joe Biden is a devout practitioner of his faith. We have had presidents who have co-opted faith for political gain, who have seem like they're not serious about their faith at all, so that they but gone to church, done things, and it seems like political show. You don't get that with Joe Biden at all. You get that this is someone whose faith has carried him significantly through really difficult periods of time, losing family members tragically, and his faith has been a source of real steadiness for him throughout all of that. And to see his ability to practice his faith being publicly debated, that's gotta, I just feel bad for him, on a personal level.
Yeah, and really the bishops are sending a message not only to Joe Biden and other politicians, but to voters in a lot of ways, right? They're saying, hey, if this is the view you hold, even though it's the current law of the land, so if you agree with that law and you hold that view, you're not welcome. I don't know how they can determine that only a politician is not in good standing with the church because of the view that you hold on this, on the issue of abortion, and not have that seep over into others. And that's where people are pushing back hard. And they're like, this is actually, they are saying not only who you should vote for, but they're saying what opinions should you hold to be part of this church. And if that's the direction the Catholic Church is going in the United States, well, then that should be well known, and people should understand that. But again, that's not what the bishops do. So if any of our friends, and we'll have some Catholic leaders on, they've been on this podcast before, that remind all of us, hey, that's not how the system works. Leadership and these kinds of decisions are a little different. It's not as much of a democratic system there as it is, say, with the Southern Baptists, which takes us to our next story, which is also about faith and politics, and that's that the Southern Baptists also had their get-together this summer. See, if you don't follow religion's summertime is the time when lots of traditions and religion have their get-togethers, and they make a bunch of decisions. Our friends that are listening that are from the Methodist tradition, they know this well, because they have an annual conference in the Methodist tradition, meaning that they have a get together every June, and a bunch of decisions are made there, like where pastors are going to serve, because they get moved around by the bishop in the Methodist church, and lots of decisions are made. So much so that they actually call their organized group of churches in the Methodist world the annual conference. They name it after the fact that they have an annual meeting. It would be like calling your area the annual meeting, because it's so important. That's when these decisions are made. Well, that's really important, for Methodists. Bishops get together around that time. The Baptists also get together at this time, and they had a big election on who their president was going to be. This is where I just think it's nice to contrast the Southern Baptists in the United States with the global Catholic Church structure. Couldn't be more different, but what they share in common is they have people that are parts of their churches. All of those people are part of we the people of this country. And so many of our decisions in this country are influenced by the happenings, whether it's in the informality of the Baptist Church, Southern Baptist, or the Catholic Church. I'm also not a Southern Baptist, but they had to get together and beat back a hostile takeover from the most extreme edges of the Southern Baptist world by a vote. So unlike in the church where the Pope is going to, in the Catholic Church where the Pope is going to appoint bishops, and that's how they become bishops. So a lot of these bishops that are now very conservative came in under the former Pope, who was also very conservative. So after a decade or two, Pope Francis's bishops will be in place in the United States, and that'll make a political shift and political change. In the Baptist world, it's just whoever shows up and is on the committees and then goes and represents the church at their big annual meeting. And so they fought off a really aggressive push from conservatives in the Southern Baptists. And you might think all Southern Baptists are conservatives. I promise you, they come in a range of conservatism.
Yes.
The group that was hard pushing were calling themselves the Pirates or something. Like they had pirate flags, and they were like they felt the Southern Baptists had become too liberal. They were the old school fundamentalists from your days. Like they were that crowd, and they were making another hard push to take over the Southern Baptists. So now only a very, very conservative person is now the president of the Southern Baptists, which again doesn't tell Baptists what to say, doesn't tell them what to think. You can't restrict anyone's communion. You can't even tell someone not to be baptized as a Baptist. But it's a big deal. It's a real thing in the social political system. So that's going on.
And I'm glad you made that clarification, because there certainly was a extremist conservative push by these, theological pirates to take over the party or take over the denomination, and they had frankly a really good showing. But let's not pretend that this is like the fundamentalist modernist controversy of the early 1900s, where we've got theological liberals versus theological conservatives. This is very conservative people versus very, very conservative people.
What if they did ranked choice voting there on that, and they kind of ranked them up for their, I'm going to vote for the 3 varies first, and then I'm going to go with a 1 vary and then a 2 vary.
This is not representing an actual, significant difference of opinion. This is more like what and we saw this with Republicans with Trump. What kind of tone are we going to take? It's not that we've got a difference in policy or philosophy. it's what's our public stance going to be like? We're still going to believe these things. We're just not going to tweet it that meanly.
Yes.
There's like that's
The
what was
style over
happening with.
substance. Yeah. The
Yes.
style question. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And the other really interesting thing coming out of the Southern Baptist Convention is how the Southern Baptist Convention is handling allegations of sexual abuse within their denomination, which again is difficult. It's not analogous to the Catholic Church because Southern Baptist churches are congregationally ruled. They are autonomous. Through Baptist church polity, there's churches make their own decisions about things. They choose their own pastors. They handle their own budgets. They like all of those things. The denomination is more a free association that exists that has very little governing authority over the life of individual churches. So given that there's been a rash of accusations of sexual abuse within Southern Baptist churches, how those churches are handling it and what recommendations the denomination is making, it's very different than how all of this gets handled within the Catholic Church. But the executive committee of the Southern Baptist Convention had been involved in investigating some of these things. The delegates at the convention overwhelmingly voted to have an independent oversight of the executive committee through these sexual abuse allegations in their investigation that's taking place. So that bodes well in my mind for the future of the church, at least in this denomination, at least in how they're handling pastors and other staff people within their denomination acting inappropriately and even being involved in criminal activities. So it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out, but it was a bit of a rebuke of Southern Baptist leadership by the members of the denomination.
And to tie it back to politics for one sidestep, what they were hearing and what people were saying was they felt that the Southern Baptists had been too hardwired into Republicanism. That was one of the pushes. That was one of the motivations for wanting to get away from it. It was big talk at that convention that was going on. And on this issue of leaders abusing people, especially abusing children, it happens in all the religious traditions, in the Christian traditions. And what needs to be made aware is that whether you have a highly structured system like the Catholic Church, where the priest has control and there's the hierarchy is as pure as it gets, straight up to the Pope, right? Or you have the very flat open system, which you just described of the Southern Baptists. These issues show up and they're covered up and they're not dealt with. Both systems don't treat this well.
Right. That's right.
A style of organization is not going to be the answer to child abuse and to other sexual abuse in our religious communities. And when people think it is, and so often this is what happens, people say like, we need to get a better process and a better system in place, hoping that's going to solve the problem. It's not sufficient. There's a level of pain and deception and cruelty and evil that's embedded in that. It has to be dealt with honesty and with openness and with investigation. And you can have that in a hierarchical system, and you can have it in a flat system, and you can also not have it in both of those systems. So it's something that needs so much more attention. I am still utterly shocked that the child abuse cases has not absolutely ended religion in America. I cannot believe that for the most part, we all know and we just all keep going on with it. Now, I'm a religious person. I've run religious communities. I think they do great work in the world. I guess there's part of me that's glad that they did not that it didn't ruin all the good that was being done. But I'm a little shocked at just the level at which it hasn't had anything close to shutting all these places down. I mean, a couple of dioceses have gone bankrupt, and had to get insurance and some of that stuff, but sold off buildings, but not at all at the level that you would think that it needs to, that we just have a way to absorb abuse and sexual abuse in this society and child abuse at a level that is just really problematic.
Right, but it's not just religion. It hasn't ended the Republican Party,
Yeah.
which has been a haven for abusive people. It didn't end Penn State football.
Yeah.
Like there, we have this capacity to just kind of put this stuff out of our mind and keep going, and that's a terrifying thought.
So much. I really wish that it wouldn't had. Speaking of what seems like it's too much, in our weekly reminder that there was an insurrection led by the former president of the United States and then supported by members of Congress who they themselves had to hide and run away on January 6th. There's a little news story that came out that I thought was interesting. Now we're moving into the phase in which these hundreds of people who have been arrested are now full cases are being made public about them. And so one case is out. But Dan and Rob, you might be interested in this. We had a run-in with the people down in Marco Island when we were on the Vote Common Good tour. And so if you don't know, friends, we were on a Vote Common Good tour. We went to Marco Island, and a bunch of Proud Boys came and protested our event and were disruptive and aggressive. And then I had a meeting with them in a bar afterward to talk about big issues. And so I've been in some conversation with a couple of those people. And it's pretty clear to me that some of the people in the insurrection were there in Florida. Florida's become a bit of a hotbed for this. And so I reached out and asked if any of those people were there. And I got a cryptic answer back. So my guess is, we may have been in the presence of insurrectionists.
That's fascinating. I just had a conversation with my wife, Vanessa, who was there in Marco Island and spoke at that event where the Proud Boys were. And we just had a conversation just this last week about, hey, I wonder if any of those Proud Boys were a part of the insurrection. So that's fascinating. I'm glad that we're following up on that.
So all that to say, the reason I bring it up is because these are people that just live in regular old places. I was sort of joking with somebody the other day, telling a bit of this story. He's making a documentary about this. And I said, the thing you have to remember is these same people are just ordinary people otherwise. Like you wouldn't often know. One of these guys that I was interacting with, apparently when he's not leading, shouting matches at Faith, Hope, and Love for a Change in Election Day rallies, he runs karaoke on the beach. Like he's just a guy, he's just doing his thing and getting along, and then, supports the insurrection and fills his Facebook feed up with QAnon stuff and with all the business. And by the way, he told me that on June 26th in Arizona, that's when we're really going to find out what's going on. So apparently in that world of rumors, something's coming this weekend. So something big on Saturday is going to be popping out. That's straight from the keypad of someone deeply connected to this. Okay, but all the way back to the story. So one of the lawyers for defendants on January 6th is trying to take this opportunity to help the people that she's working with realize what's going on in the country, and people are experiencing these awakenings. So this particular lawyer, I'm going to read a bit of this Huffington Post story to you. She says the story talks about this notebook that has a bunch of notes written in it, like a kid's a wide rule notebook, like from junior high or whatever. It says, at first you might mistake the student's book for a book of reports, extra wide margins, awkward prose, and inflated summary leading to a personal takeaway. One report focuses on the film Schindler's List, the other on the book Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. The report's author also read the book Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee and watched Netflix documentary Mudbound and the PBS documentary Slave by Another Name and the History Channel's Burning Tulsa. She, like many other students, preferred to take the cinematic route. So I chose the movies whenever I could because it's sunk in better. And all of this is because the person then goes on to say, this is a person that was at the insurrection, is arrested, in jail. Her lawyer asked her to read and to watch all of this stuff. And she said, I've lived a very sheltered life and truly haven't experienced the way many other people have. She wrote this to the judge in her report. I've learned that even though we all live in a wonderful country, things still need to improve. People of all colors should feel safe, as I do, when they walk down the street. And she goes on to say, I didn't know any of this. I didn't learn any of this in school. Like that list of books and those list of movies, to her, it was all new material.
Mm.
And this is that place where I know it's hard for people to have empathy. And we are certainly hard on the insurrection, especially the politicians who support it.
Mm-hmm.
There were tens of thousands of people showing up at the Capitol and were part of it at one level or the other, that you could rightly borrow the phrase from Jesus to say, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. Like
Yeah.
there is a level of lack of perception, understanding, knowledge, and information that it would be so powerful if it could be absorbed into a person, that would lead them not to hold the views they hold. So the act of persuasion, the act of communication, the act of instruction, it is one of the most important things we do in our politics. I know we need to organize people better. I know we need to clear the way for the vote. I know that we need to not have ranked choice voting. I know we need to do all of that stuff, because we have to make the vote work just right. But really, we also have to persuade and inform and instruct and help people to gain an understanding. That's what the kind of work Vote Common Good does. Like, that's what we're trying to do. That's why we do this podcast and all the other stuff that we do. That's why we're going to ride the border in September to November, which you should go to wethepeopleride.org and find out about that. But that's the work we're trying to do. Because if you don't get into helping people have a different story, they're going to stay in the story that they're in. Now, I'm not saying they should or shouldn't be there. I'm just saying they are there, right? And for all the people who push back and say there's no way a white person, that's white, you can lay all the reasons on why people don't know what they don't know. You can blame yourself or your family or your politics on why you didn't know what Juneteenth was, 3 years ago, and now it's a federal holiday. It's not only an issue of where does the problem lie, where's the responsibility lie. It's also an issue of people just literally don't know. They truly, truly don't know. And watching these people now in jail and are facing serious life-altering consequences for their bad choices, be awakening to all of these issues. It's in all of the brokenheartedness of this insurrection, a little glimmer of some good news and a little glimmer of hope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would, I cynically or sarcastically, I would ask, is this critical race theory that they're being exposed to? Cynically, I would wonder, are they simply saying what needs to be said to, get a lighter sentence or get their, to have the judge, feel more kindly towards them? Ultimately, I think what this illustrates is that so much of the conspiracy theories and everything that goes along with them is based on ignorance. It's based on ignorance and people not having a clear understanding of what is actually taking place, and in fact having a misguided notion of it based on narratives built around patriarchy and Christian nationalism and white supremacy that have told stories that have caused people to view the world the way that they do. And when new stories are told and understanding is opened up, that makes a real difference. And that's why this whole push against critical race theory being taught in schools is an important debate and is something to keep an eye on, because there is this sense that if we begin to tell the story differently, that's going to have an impact on people.
Absolutely. That's why they fight. That's why they fight the story. Look, if you were to watch, if you're unaware of many of these issues and you watch this list of films, Schindler's List, Just Mercy, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, Mudbound, Slavery by Another Name, Burning Tulsa, yeah, you could be like, hey, I'm just going to watch those 7 movies because I want the judge to give me. They're gonna creep in. Like, these are not movies that are, this is not the right wing propaganda that also a lot of these people have watched. Like, this person probably watched a lot of YouTube videos that told her what was really going down, and then she watches all this and is like, oh man, this country is different than I thought that it was, and that recognition that this country is not all that I thought that it was. And then that means that it's more than I ever thought it was. That's a hard thing for any of us to do. And it
reminds me a bit of the news this last week that Marjorie Taylor Greene, Congresswoman from Georgia, visited the Holocaust Museum and suddenly has a whole new compassion for Jewish people. It's like, yep, Marjorie, this is something that you should have already had,
Yeah.
But I guess it's a better late than never kind of thing, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess it is. It's easy for us to assume that people who are pursuing elected federal office would carry a certain base level of, they might not know about economics through, modern monetary theory. They need our podcast for that. But, the Holocaust should have been, should have been fairly well informed around the big plot points, at least there. Yeah, no, it's harsh. But look, let's not blame people for what they don't know. Let's help people know a little bit more. So if you find yourself as a political, spiritual, common good evangelist, keep up the good work, everybody. Well, as I said at the start, I feel like I have the flu. I'm going to go pass out. So if without further ado, got anything else?
No, I hope you feel better, Doug, and I hope everybody has a great day.
Well, if I don't feel better, it's going to be a real problem at some point.
Yeah, if it's just me and producer Dan next week, the worst happened.
That's right. Just look for that tea leaf. Look for that tea leaf. All right. Hey, happy Tuesday. Thanks, Dan.